Rachel, it's great to see you.
It's always great to see you, Welton. Thus, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for doing it. I know what your schedule's like, and you've made time, and we're very grateful for it.
Sure, absolutely, anytime.
Let's start small. How's our country?
Oh, no, I can't wait till we get to the big stuff. Our country is good. I mean, our country's good. And you take the 50,000 feet look at our country, and I would rather live in this country than anywhere else on earth. I still think we're the greatest hope of civilization. We economically are heading in the right direction, including in the all-important measure, which is both a moral and a functional day-to-day measure of our economic health, which is economic inequality. Finally, starting to see some dents there in terms of wages going up for regular people, not just people at the top. I think that we've got a president right now who is a credit to our country and a force for inspiration around the world. And I think we are good. And we are also some other things in addition to being good.
Well, let me go to what may be one of the other things that you're alluding to. This presidential election campaign has been characterized by words like pivot, pivot again, Pinocchios, who gets the most, crimes, liars. Has this election cycle been good or bad for our nation?
One thing that I think is good about this election cycle, I don't think it has brought out our best. But I do think it has posed a very clear question. There is a very clear contrast. And I think it's helped clarify an important thing that we don't usually grapple with in this country, which is, are we fundamentally a good country? Mm-hmm. Are we fundamentally a good system? Is our democracy the right thing for us? Mm-hmm. Because we're sort of being asked to give thumbs up or thumbs down to our system as it is. Right. I mean, the Republican candidate has talked about, when he's president, it's going to be all new generals. Mm-hmm. That's not the relationship between the civilian government and our professional military. That is not how it works. Right. He has talked about, if he's president, that he's going to, that the press won't work the same way that the press works now. That the press won't be able to get away with what they can get away with now. Well, there's a reason it's the First Amendment to the Constitution, that it's fundamentally who we are, the freedom of the press, and we've got a candidate who's promising to undo that. The basic stuff, the taxes thing sometimes seems like a small thing, but ultimately we ask our citizens to pay taxes to fund the government, which does stuff that we agree needs to be done. And we've got a candidate who is bragging about the fact that he doesn't pay taxes, says that makes him smart. Mm-hmm. Of course, it makes us all stupid, those of us who do. Yeah. That's really fundamental stuff. And so that is that kind of a contrast between the two candidates, I think, can be good because it's clarifying. Hillary Clinton seems boring a lot of the time because she's basically saying, I would like our country to do some different things. There are things about our system that is stacked against the wrong people, and there are ways I would like to improve it, but I also believe in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And so, I sort of feel like, I think I was talking with somebody the other night using a fishing metaphor for this, that Donald Trump is sort of saying, I will catch fish for you. I will blow up the lake with dynamite. Yeah. And then we will have lots of fish and it'll be great. Hillary Clinton is promising to change the lure, and keep fishing. Do you want to burn the place down or not? Yeah. And it's helpful to have that question being posed really bluntly.
Up until now, what has been the most shocking, the most disturbing, most disappointing moment or moments in this campaign?
That is a good question and a hard question. Do you have an answer for that? Is there something that...
I don't have anything in mind. I when I wrote the question, I thought there are so many answers to that I wouldn't know where to go. So that's why I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been, there's sort of a politically prurient side to me. It's sort of childish side to me that, and I feel a little weird saying this to you, Welton, in particular, but like, he talked about his personal endowment and I'm not talking about money at a primary debate. Like that's like you couldn't persuade me ahead of time that would have happened in real life and that wouldn't be the end. Right. Even after that, though, when he won the Republican presidential nomination, he then found reason to publish his testosterone levels. So, like, I guess what's next?
Yeah.
There's that's small stuff, but it is. I think it's shocking. In terms of larger things, what I just mentioned about there will be all new generals, the sort of cavalier ignorance about nuclear weapons and what they are and whether they should be used and what America's basic policies are around nuclear weapons, and thinking that you can replace all the generals. I mean, part of me believes that Mr. Trump thinks that he gets a uniform and mirrored sunglasses once he becomes president, that he thinks this is some sort of that he's mounting some sort of military coup or something, or he doesn't exactly know what the president gets. There's been stuff big and small, but I have a feeling by the time this gets on the air, something new will surpass it.
Yeah. The woman that we used to call Dean of the White House Press Corps, Helen Thomas, once said to me, "All presidents lie. What makes the difference is what they lie about." I'd like you to apply that to this year's presidential campaign.
I think, it's interesting. I think the other thing that makes a difference about lying, if you take Helen's premise as given that all presidents lie, what they lie about, absolutely. But it's also how easily they live with the lie. How easy it trips off the tongue. I mean, Hillary Clinton has definitely gotten some things factually wrong. In the first debate, which we just had a few days ago, she said that she hadn't described the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal as the gold standard. She sort of fudged it and said, "No, what I was saying was that I hoped it would be the gold standard." No, she described it as the gold standard, actually. Yeah. You can't get away from that. Okay. At the same time, we stopped counting. I think we had 28 different fact-check things from Trump in the same debate, including like really, really basic stuff. I never said climate change was a hoax caused by the Chinese. Yes, you did. I never said that pregnancy is an inconvenience to an employer. Yes, you did. The stuff large and small, his facility with lying, his just his ease about saying stuff that's blatantly not true is it's uncomfortable. I mean, and I think that's actually part of why truth and lies have been a slippery thing in terms of how the media has covered this campaign, because usually the incentive, even if it's subliminal, the incentive for pinning a politician down on lying about something is that once you pin them, they squirm, and that you want to see how they react to being caught. And you want to see how they either convey an apology or continue to lie or get angry or walk it back or try to make it right. None of those things apply. Donald Trump doesn't squirm. When you get him something dead to rights on lying, he doesn't back off, doesn't express shame, doesn't admit that he's lied, doesn't just goes through it. And that makes when you don't get the response to what you to calling them on it, it makes it hard to keep going back. You know, he's not going to respond. I actually think that's part of why he's been able to lie so much without the press going so nuts.
I'm curious as to what you do personally when you're in an interview, whether it's in an election campaign or not, but it certainly does apply to the election campaign. When you're in an interview and you know the person with whom you're talking has lied, what do you do? Do you call them on it? Do you pass on by and say this will get corrected later? What do you do?
It depends on the circumstance. I mean, if you are in a situation where you are, for example, like moderating a debate, if one candidate tells a lie that you know is a lie, you sort of have to give the other candidate the opportunity to point that out or challenge them on it, because you're not there to be in the middle of it. If it's a one-on-one, I think you sort of have to judge based on the size and importance of the lie. If you are getting to something that's much bigger than whatever the little white lie was about it, do you stop everything dead in its tracks and say, actually, it was 168,000, not 169,000, and you know that? I mean, are you going to... Right. Do you let somebody fudge something so that you can get to something larger? Well, it depends on how large, small the thing is that they fudge. The most important thing, though, is in the premise of your question, which is that you got to know they're lying. You have to know enough about the subject matter and be prepared enough in terms of the candidate's previous statements on the subject, or the person's previous statements on the subject, to know that a lie might be coming, to know how to listen for it, and to be confident enough to call them on it. I think most of the reasons that even in debates, candidates don't get called on obvious lies by moderators is because, or by interviewers, is because the interviewer or the moderator isn't totally confident that they've got it dead to rights, and they don't want to make themselves the story by calling somebody out when they will be wrong. I think that actually Lester Holt did a very good job with that on this in the first presidential debate between Clinton and Trump, because he the stuff that he asked about was stuff that he understood very well. And so he was able to say very confidently when Trump was interrupting him on stop and frisk, for example. Lester Holt said that was ruled unconstitutional in 2013. Donald Trump came back and said, no, it wasn't unconstitutional. And Lester Holt knew for a fact. I mean, there it is in the ruling. Yeah. Same thing with Trump not having taken a position against the Iraq War before the Iraq War started. Trump tried to contest that, and Lester was able to sort of hold his ground and pin him on it because he knew his stuff. You have to read. You have to do your homework.
Yeah. I asked you earlier about the most disturbing time for you in the election and what was said. Up until this point, what's been the high point of this election cycle for you?
It's actually from the Republican side, I think. I have this theory that the reason that Trump was able to win the Republican nomination is because of weakness in the Republican Party. And that's a problem for the country. That it's not in the Constitution that we have two major parties, but for a very long time we've had two major parties, and we have essentially evolved in our maturity as a democracy that we are a two major party system. And if one of the parties is not functioning on a substantive or even political level in any logical way, and they're not actually establishing themselves as a governing party or an ideologically coherent organization, then the system, it's not just the Republican side of it will break down, the whole system will break down. And that's worrisome. And I do think that's how Trump got to be where he is. Trump's been around for a long time. I don't think it's an accident that this is the year he was able to topple the Republican Party. I think it was a house of cards, and he just came along he was the right breeze at the right time. And so seeing Republicans who recognize that, who are trying to define a different kind of republicanism that will survive the Trump challenge, that will survive this era, that will sort of salvage what's good about that party and build on it so that they can come back stronger. That to me is heartening. Like there was this moment when Hillary Clinton named Tim Kaine to be her running mate. And there was your standard partisan instincts kicked in on both sides, and Democrats praised him and Republicans criticized him. But the Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, who's very, very conservative, but who does not like Donald Trump and is one of these guys who has not endorsed Trump, Flake tweeted almost immediately when Kaine was announced. I'm going to paraphrase it here, but he said something to the effect of trying to count the ways in which I hate Tim Kaine. So far, up to zero. Couldn't happen to a better or more honorable man. Best of luck. Yeah. And he's free to be decent in that way because the Trump take over the Republican Party doesn't work for him. He is trying to maintain a form of civil, conservative, Republican, values and ethos that is independent of what's going on with this presidential race. So he's sort of free to do that, but he did that in a way that I felt like, well, there's a building block.
Yeah.
That's a sill to build your foundation on.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a moment for me. So people who have been sort of heroically resistant to what I think has been a pretty dark time on the right side of American politics, I think they do inspire me.
Rachel, I've always liked you and then learned to love you as just for who you are. But I do know how much you care about religious freedom. Mm-hmm. And you know that I share that passion. On your very first show on MSNBC, you carried a story on religious freedom. I'll never forget that. What has this presidential campaign done to either help or undermine the public's understanding of and support for religious freedom?
That's interesting. That's a very good question. And I think that's a very open question at this point. First of all, thank you for saying those nice things, Welton. I think it's worked in a couple different ways and maybe seemingly contradictory ways. The first is that there is something of a blessing for the cause of religious freedom that a candidate like Ted Cruz didn't go the distance for the Republican nomination. There were a few candidates on the Republican side this year who have taken the words religious freedom and used them in a very dangerous way to undermine that, to essentially try to create, we've talked about this, sort of state-sponsored religion and to enshrine discrimination in both state and federal law under the auspices of protecting religious freedom in a way that perverts the idea of religious freedom so much as to almost making it meaningless in regular political discussions. So I think there is a blessing in the fact that at the top of the ticket on the Republican side, you don't have one of the people who has been truly damaging and truly demagogic on that issue. Yeah. That said, Mike Pence is the vice presidential nominee, and he's been almost as aggressive as anybody on the Republican side for that. But in Trump, you have somebody who hasn't taken and run with the Republican Party's sort of agenda on that issue. And maybe that interrupts that issue or stops it in a way that, or gives the other side of it sort of time to regroup. On the other hand, you've got Trump pursuing his own agenda on that subject. And his proposal to ban Muslims from entering the United States is, I think, the single most radical thing about him. And there's a lot. It's sort of that's the make or break, do or die, one thing you need to know about him as a candidate. And I mean, that would undo us as a country in terms of who we are and why we were founded. And so that's terrifying that he's gotten this far with that kind of proposal still is something that he's running on, even though he doesn't like to talk about it as much anymore. It also maybe is helpful, though, in sort of calling the question and making people realize what real religious freedom means and taking it away as a sort of a term of art, this sort of perverted term of art in modern Republican politics outside of Trumpism. So you see what I'm saying? It's a little bit, it's kind of contradictory directions. Do you feel like, I don't know what the Pence factor means to you in terms of how you see that?
Well, I see both of them as being very dangerous, because they are actually, and some of this, in my opinion, came during the Republican primaries as well, as we saw for one of the first times in our history, people running for the highest office in the land who, if they were honest, could not take the oath of office for the president because they would be pledging to defend the Constitution, and they've been trying to break it.
Yeah. And that's becoming a standard thing that Republican politicians running from president down to dog catcher are expected to sign on to now.
Exactly right.
I mean, that part of what I was saying about the Republican Party becoming broken is when an impulse like that, a fundamentally unconservative and even technically un-American strategy like that, it is political strategy like that, can take over what ought to be a proud and significant and serious party. It shows you that there is something wrong there.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to rebuild. I know that we do need to be a two-party system again in the future if we're going to be anything like the country we've been in the past. But I don't know how we get there.
There are so many things that I want to talk with you about and so little time for us to talk about them all. I'm going to play a childish thing. Like you said you were childish. I feel childish doing this with you.
Okay.
But I want to try it if you're game to it. I want to play a word game with you. I want to give you a name or an issue, and you give me back just your instinctive first response to it. We're not going to talk about it long. We're just going to stay there.
Is this one of those things that's going to psychologically reveal something about me, though? It's like a test, like it's like looking at an ink blot or something. You're going to be able to tell, like, what's wrong with me. Okay.
If it is, I won't tell anybody.
All right. We'll keep the diagnosis between us.
Okay. Here
so
we go.
You're going to give me a word or concept, and I give you a word back.
That's or words. You can do a sentence or two.
Okay.
The National Republican Party.
Rest in peace.
Campaign finance reform.
The Holy Grail.
And I you just got to add to that one, because we see in this election, like we haven't seen ever before, how much we need campaign finance reform, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. And, we see it at the presidential race. It's a little skewed this year because we've got this, this guy who's able to self-fund to a certain extent. But you look particularly, what's one thing that I think it's hard to focus on this year because there's so much clanging and banging at the top of the ticket, but Senate races this year, a lot of big money, big corporate Republican money in particular, went one step down from the presidential race into those Senate races right now. And you look at why, Rob Portman of Ohio all of a sudden has a safe seat in Ohio, and it's tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars just pouring in there. And again, you don't focus on it as much because it's not at the top, but without some sort of level playing field in terms of campaign finance, it's just a money race. That's all it is.
Okay, I broke my own rule.
All right, sorry.
And somebody's going to be saying, well, that's the way those liberals are. They'll just do that. Hillary Clinton.
First woman president.
The National Democratic Party.
Unwieldy. The National Democratic Party right now is an unwieldy mess, I would say.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. International phenomenon. He will be remembered, no matter what happens to him here, he will be remembered as a huge part of American history for generations.
Gosh, you did good.
I'm not sick. Welton.
Rachel, there is, in my opinion, a moral component related to decisions that have to be made in this election cycle that are more prominent than usual. I'd like to hear you comment on how voters this time have to weigh the importance of partisanship over the importance of patriotism.
Well, we're seeing it modeled by some Republican leaders. I mean, there aren't a lot of them, but there's a handful of them who are saying, yes, I'm a Republican, but I'm an American who cares for my country more than I care for my party, and therefore I can't sign on with what our nominee is saying, whether or not those people are supporting Hillary Clinton instead. But you're seeing it particularly, it's been interesting for me to see that particularly from national security people who have previously been apolitical or who have been on the conservative side, who've been advisors to or who have served in the military or served in other national security roles under Republican administrations or Republican presidents. You are seeing people say, like, this is I am not comfortable as a person getting involved in politics at all, or making endorsements or telling people how to vote, but this time I've got to. And you're seeing that happen in dozens of instances on the sort of right to center right. And that's been very interesting to me. That's modeling a form of moral and patriotic leadership that I think we're going to be sort of looking to for a long time.
Yeah. This would be a hard question for me, and I'm sure it may be for you. Where in this whole election cycle, with the whole bit, I'm not talking just about candidates at the forefront or candidates in the states or whatever, but anybody involved, where have you found the clearest and most influential moral voice, moral compass in this election cycle?
This is probably, that's very hard to say. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that I have been inspired by the people who, in most cases, I very much disagree with ideologically, on the right, who feel like they don't have a home in the modern Republican Party with Donald Trump at the head of it. I do find that inspiring, even though those are folks that I wouldn't, end up lining up with on other things. Seeing people grapple with their own moral responsibility against what the political expectation of them, I think is moving. But I think the immigration authorities in the United States have just started, sort of recently, maybe the past few months, posting on Instagram individual portraits of new Americans, people who are becoming citizens right now in the middle of this presidential campaign. People from all over the world, people who are serving in the U.S. military but haven't been serving as citizens, people who are coming here as refugees, people who have lived here for a long time, who are just now becoming citizens. And they're sort of doing it Humans of New York style, where they just, there isn't a clear interviewer. People are just explaining in their own words why it is that they decided to become a citizen and how they feel about it. And I just think in this environment, they're proposing to ban all Muslims from the United States and talking about immigrants from Mexico as if they're some sort of criminal, maybe not even criminal, maybe even animal sort of infection that we've got as a country, and the United States needing an economic strategy that's we win, you all lose for the rest of the world, redefining American leadership as not just zero sum but predatory in terms of taking it away from other people so we can get it. To hear that kind of political discussion, not just happening, but being rewarded by the American people in this country, and in the face of that, to be able to see an image of America through that, that is more true, and that calls to you, and that is what you want for yourself and your family, and that you will go through hell and high water to get there and become a new American. That is, it's not just moving, it's a good reminder, of how to see clearly, how to see through this fog. And that is, it's kind of been my happy place, my civics geek happy place.
Good.
New citizens. I'll probably be going to swearing in ceremonies by the time November rolls around.
Well, speaking of moral authority, one of the things that comes to my mind is the religious right. The religious right this time around has shown us its true nature. We've always asked them to be honest and say this is really not about religion, it's about politics. But they've outdone themselves. And I thought, I knew if I asked you this question, you were going to say, well, what do you think? And my first words are disappointment and hypocrisy and danger. How do you characterize the work of the religious right in this election?
Well, I think they've undone themselves a little bit. I think that making the hypocrisy so clear. The thing that it reminded me of a lot, seeing the religious right trying to make over Donald Trump into somebody who they could justify their support for, like, giving him Bible verses to read, 2 Corinthians and all the rest of it. And, like almost literally making up a conversion story or born again story for him because he didn't have one of his own. Mm-hmm. It reminded me actually a lot of the Abramoff scandal and the Ralph Reed role in the Jack Abramoff scandal, which, as you remember, right, was Ralph Reed getting caught out helping Jack Abramoff sell to his casino gambling clients a political strategy that would work. So they'd get Ralph Reed's religious right followers who thought they were following him because of some moral cause and some religious community effort. He'd trick them into supporting or opposing one particular part of a casino gambling lobbying organization so that Jack Abramoff could sell that and get gambling where he wanted it and then protect his client's interest other places. I felt like when Ralph Reed got caught out for that, it was this interesting question because it was like, all right, well, this exposes the scam. But it also means that Ralph Reed can't ever be a trusted religious right leader anymore, can he? Right. Oh, no, he can. He can, actually. Even if he'd gone to prison for that, he could come out of prison and do it because he would have proved helpful for what the religious right really is, which is a partisan voter mobilization effort and fundraising scheme for the right. And that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the hypocrisy is very rarely laid bare so obviously, but even when it is, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's right? I mean, do you think they've...
No, I think that... I think I tend to be harder on them than you do because they're doing it in the name of religion, and they're not only compromising the basic democratic principles of our nation, they're also compromising their religion. And they're jumping through all kinds of biblical and theological calisthenics trying to justify their support for Donald Trump when all they need to do is say, we're for him because we want to win an election.
Because we're Republicans and we are a Republican Party interest group.
Exactly.
And that's what we're here for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now I promise you there is no segue from the religious right to what I'm about to ask you.
Okay.
Don't even associate them.
No, I'm already not. Waiting with bated breath.
Generally speaking,
yeah.
How have the media done in covering this election? And I'm asking all the way from the amount of time given to the candidates asking second questions that challenge statements that candidates have made that may not be accurate. Just how have the media done?
I think it's been a mixed bag. On the amount of coverage, there's been a lot of criticism that part of the financial advantage that Donald Trump has had in the campaign is that he gets so much free media he hasn't had to buy it, and that's certainly the case that he makes. I do think that's not necessarily the media's fault. I think that Donald Trump has had a very good media strategy. And it's part of how you compete as a politician. And the Republicans he was up against in the primary, and to a lesser extent Clinton in the general, have not played their media game as well. And he's been very good at implicitly persuading news organizations to always have a camera, always have microphones, always have correspondents nearby whenever he is speaking, by sheer dint of the fact that he is likely, every time he's speaking, to say something that is outrageous to the point of being newsworthy. So that's yep, you can lament that, but that's also a media strategy.
Sure it is.
People who make news tend to get news coverage, and he makes news by being willing to shock on every subject, at every turn, at every day. Yeah. And that's, I'm not saying that everybody, there was a good comedic moment when Hillary Clinton went on Between Two Ferns. She did that thing with the comedian the other day. And he said to her, in sort of mock seriousness, he said, "Did you ever look at Donald Trump and think, I really should be more racist. It's like, it's obviously a joke, and she just looks at him. I don't even think she answered. But it's like, right, when you say shockingly racist and offensive things, people are going to put the camera on you, and that means you will get a lot of coverage. Doesn't mean you should get positive coverage, but you will get coverage. Now, if you are a narcissist, or you're a demagogue, you don't believe there's any such thing as negative coverage, that just the fact that the cameras are turned on you means you're winning. Yeah. That's the case that he would make. I don't think it's necessarily been that way.
I agree.
Yeah.
When you're on the air, whether it's on the Rachel Maddow Show or whether you're doing just general coverage of the election, when you're on the air, when have you had to bite your lips the hardest to keep from saying out loud what you really wanted to say at that moment?
When Bill Clinton gave his Democratic convention speech. I had a very unpopular take on that I did voice a little. I had a lot more to say. And and the reason I did is just I felt like, my view on this, I think, is very much not most people's view on this. I'll tell you what I think, but I'm not going to go on and on about it because it's going to tell you probably more about me than it will about Bill Clinton or about how people are going to see this. But he gave a speech for his wife at the convention, as he should have. But he gave a speech that foregrounded, that used as the device for his speech, his romantic attachment to his wife. His first lines was like, I met a girl, or 1970, whatever, I saw a girl. And I kept waiting for the next part where he was going to be like, and then I saw another girl, and then I met another girl, and then I was president and there was this girl. Hillary Clinton has a lot going for her as a presidential candidate. Yeah. Your romantic fealty to her is an inappropriate trope for you to commend her to the country. And you are a lot of things, Bill Clinton, but your, skills and affection as a husband are actually not what I'm interested in hearing from any presidential candidate's spouse about them. Right. And I'm certainly not interested in hearing that about the first woman president. And so when I bit my tongue the hardest, it was just, I just wanted to tell him to sit down. And so that's, that probably says more about me than it does about the country, but boy, did that drive me crazy.
I'm curious, you do so many interviews. This may be a throwaway question or it may be a really good question. Do you have a question that you have hoped someone would ask you because you have an answer that nobody's given you a chance to talk about?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think of myself as having too many answers right now.
Well, a lot of people do think you have a lot of answers.
That is dangerous. I don't know that I have the right answer, but I do feel like there is a question that we ought to be asking each other. Okay. And that we ought to be thinking about our own answers for. And that is, how is this election going to leave us changed as a country? Because when you have violated all of the norms of political behavior, everything from not releasing your taxes to talking about your genitals at a debate, to saying that a particular religious faith should be banned from the United States of America. When you start violating norms like that, how do we get them back? How do we, after this year, do we get presidential candidates releasing their tax returns anymore? Or is that norm, now that it's been violated, now is it gone? Precedent is a powerful thing. And we have rewarded a lot of unprecedented violations of both decency and decorum. And I want to know if we're getting them back. And if we're not, what are our new standards?
That's actually where I was going with my next question, but let me tweak it a little bit because you've already said that so well. What have we learned in this election cycle that may motivate us to do elections differently next time?
It's funny, the Republican Party chairman didn't get that much attention a couple weeks ago, said that if John Kasich wants to run in 2020, the Republican Party will basically make sure that he doesn't get the nomination. Will intervene because he's not supporting the nominee this year. That can't be the lesson.
Right.
It can't be the lesson that people who do what they think is right for honorable reasons, who show their work, who explain why they're doing it, and make a different case to the country on the basis of a reasonably held, open, moral stance. It can't be that is ruled out of bounds.
Is there a possibility someone will bring forth the need to demand that candidates share their taxes, or even share their how they're doing physically?
Oh, their health information. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the ways that we could answer that question about sort of reestablishing norms, right? Mm-hmm. Make it official. Make it part of what it means, part of what you have to file with the FEC in order to be listed as a major party presidential candidate, that you have to file not just by tradition and expectation, you have to file medical information, but we expect to know your height, your weight, and all of these medical things about you. And or an independent panel has to examine you. Or I don't know. I wouldn't want that necessarily, but we could make tax returns part of the deal. We could make some of those things. It's like, after Governor McDonnell in Virginia took the ride in the white Ferrari and the hundreds of thousands of dollars in money and all that stuff, and they found ultimately, after it went up to the Supreme Court, that even though he took all of those things essentially in a quid pro quo bribery or organization, it wasn't illegal for him to take any of it, because the laws, we expected that somebody wouldn't allow themselves to be bribed that way, but we can't say that you did. Now in Virginia, they've had to go through and they've changed all the gift laws, right? And they've made it so that literally you cannot. It's not just by expectation. It is literally illegal now that you cannot take that stuff. Maybe once all our norms are broken, we have to make them not norms but rules. It's depressing to think we'd have to go there, though.
It's a very practical question. Between now and Election Day, what are you looking for? What are you looking the most at? And what should our listeners be looking for and thinking
in terms of understanding the way the election's going to go?
Mm-hmm. Or how it should go, or just, what's going to drive what happens on Election Day between now and the election?
God, I don't know. I feel like in a normal year, you know what to say. In a normal year, even geographically where to look, and what the factors are in terms of the behavior of the candidates and the campaigns in order to predict, who's doing well and who's behaving decently and all those things. This year, honestly, even if you want to get really technical in terms of the way some people do a very data-driven approach to understanding the status of the electorate and the status of the campaign. They look at, swing state ad buys and how the advertising budgets are going up and everything. The Trump campaign has been lying about its advertising. Like, that's weird. That's never happened before. There are firms that track media buys that say, like, okay, how much money has been spent on ads in various states. And when the Trump campaign announces that they're doing $10 million of ads in these states or whatever, they then don't. Like, why? You're lying about that too? Like, A, it's checkable, but B, there's no advantage to you in lying for it. It's a fake. There's a fake aspect to even the granular stuff. They've lied about the number of campaign offices that they've got in states like Florida. Like, when you say you've got a campaign office and people go there and they knock on the door and there's nobody there. Why? You're not only telling us something about yourself by lying, but you're making it very hard to cover the behavior, the raw political science behavior of the two sides by faking something that I don't think anybody's ever thought to fake before. So that whenever somebody's lying to me or faking me out, my next feeling is like, that this must be a distraction designed to designed to keep me occupied, being confused by something that ought to be easy so that I'm not looking somewhere else. There must be something interesting going on over here that I'm not looking at. And I don't know if that's what's happening this time. So I sort of feel like I'm on my toes. I'm trying to stay hydrated, trying to exercise every day, trying to sleep. And because I really don't know where things are going to come from. I also don't know where the swing states are going to be this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be the same map of swing states that Obama and Romney had, but it looks like, for example, like Virginia is not in play. Mm-hmm. Looks like part of Maine maybe is. Mm-hmm. Trump is bragging that he's going to win Connecticut. He's not going to win Connecticut. Yeah. But like, why is he going to Connecticut then? Yeah. I mean, this is one of those times where usually what we use to make good decisions about where to focus, who to look at, and what to consider deeply in terms of weighing the two sides is informed by what has happened in previous elections. And in this election, you cannot use past experience to predict future behavior. So we'll study this one for a long time, but our study of past elections doesn't help us with this one.
I want to end not with a question, but with a request.
Okay.
You are a patriot. You are a good citizen. You care about what happens that you talk about on your show. I want you to take a minute or two and do what I would call a homily. You can do whatever you want to call it, about a statement to the American people about what you feel and what you want to see us get to at the end of this election.
That's a tall order, Welton.
Yes.
That's a tall order from anybody. It's a particularly tall order from you. If asked to do this by anybody else, I would call Welton and ask to borrow a homily that you've prepared on a previous subject.
You don't have to have a poem.
Is that the first rule of a good homily?
Yeah, that's it.
Let go of the whole idea of a point. I would say this, and this, I think, just in part comes out of the discussion that we've just had here today, which is, I think, take heart in the experience of our ancestors. My mom immigrated to this country. My dad's parents immigrated to this country. You can look any day of the week at people coming from all over the world to become citizens of this country, asking to come to this country, sneaking to come into this country if they have to. Take a look at what our forebears, or ourselves, if we're immigrants ourselves, or new people coming to this country right now, take a look through their eyes, through those eyes, in terms of what is good and valuable and worth saving about this country, and build from that. And it's very easy to be cynical about the broken system, or about having, you hear people say, these are two very unpopular candidates. This is a choice between two options that the American people don't want. It's easy to cast pox on both their houses and say, this is, I don't like the choices that I have been given. But there is a choice to be made between our country continuing with respect for the basic fundamental norms of how we run ourselves, both domestically and in the world, and somebody who has no interest in that, and who thinks it's a joke and worth burning down. And I mean, that sounds like a small c conservative way, I think, to approach this election. But I feel like President Obama has been sort of the best pundit yet on this election in terms of saying, listen, we have faced a lot of challenges in this country, and I'm the first person to say that we're not perfect and we have a lot of work to do. But what we've got is worth building on. And if you want to tear it down, consider everything that you were going to tear down, and look around the world and see what else you might want to build ourselves up like. Because a lot of people have given their lives and worked and spent their lives working to make this country the beacon that it is. And It's an insult to them to say that they accomplished nothing, but it's also a test of our responsibility, of our capability as citizens in our generation to hold on to what's good about what came before us and to try to contribute to it in our own way. And so I just feel like there's a lot at risk.
Rachel Maddow, I'm not just grateful for you. I am thankful for your wisdom, your insight, the generosity of your time, and for you personally.
Welton. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Okay. It's great to see you. You have to give me a hug. Is the hug going to make air?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you what.